Scariest parents of Reddit. What was a legit reason why you didn't let your son/daughter have that friend overgo to a sleepover? Story 1. Kid was on serious medication for major behavioral issues. The kid's sibling was the favorite. Parents would dump said unwanted kid at our house without medication because it was good to take a break from antipsychotics. I say unwanted kid because had come over on an empty stomach and left for hours after the promised pickup time. While they took the other kid out to eat and shop, they also didn't offer snacks, drinks, and eventually banned reciprocal visits. It sucks that the parents were shitty. Kid tried to commit suicide at one point and was institutionalized where, wonder of wonders, not taking a weekend break for medication left him much more stable. Edit to answer this happened about 10 years ago. CPS got involved after the kid was institutionalized and things got better for him, at least. The ban on reciprocal visits happened after there were some strong words about their parenting decisions. Having kids doesn't fix relationship problems. Story 2. He was a complete with no respect for adults. Breaking point was when he put bleach in a spray bottle and chased our 5-year-old around spraying him. His mother apologized, never again. Story 3. She was a chronic liar. My daughter met her in kindergarten. She lied constantly about everything. One day my daughter asked us to help her put together a birthday card and make a homemade present for her friend's birthday. But when she brought the gifts to school, it turned out the girl had lied about what day her birthday was. I didn't want to put down my daughter's first good friend, but I refused to have them spend more time together than was necessary. I was relieved when she started ending every story about something her friend had said with, "It's probably not true, though." She outgrew that friend after a few months, met the girl's parents later in the year. That poor kid never had a chance. Edit, I should have realized I left some next time on Dragon Ball Z type shiz at the end of my last comment. The parents were concerned with themselves, they were divorced, and the mom was living with her new boyfriend. I got into a conversation with the mother. During after-school pickup, parents let the kids run around on the playground with friends, so there's some time to kill anyway. First half hour into our first encounter, she goes into several major scandals between her and her ex-husband or boyfriend, some of it pretty in nature. One thing she always said was, "Can you believe he'd do X horrible thing to my daughter?" Regardless of whether the daughter had been involved, I got the vibe from them that their daughter was a pawn and that their home life was chaotic. The ex-husband had face tats, a record, and he asked an elementary school teacher if he could bring beer to field day. The field day thing happened much later, long after my daughter stopped hanging out with the other girl. Sometimes when I think my life is chaotic or messy, I think of them. Edit, you guys have some crazy stories. Story 4. My parents went to drop off my stuff at a friend's house because I wanted to spend the night. They walked in, and my dad said, "Nope, you're coming home." She had 2 brothers. One was super nice. One was very touchy. Her dad then threatened my dad and said he can't take a child out of his home without his permission. My dad, being 63 and a large dude, got his face. Her dad looked like a string bean and said he was taking me home right now. My dad told me later he had a really bad gut feeling something bad would have happened if I stayed. Her touchy brother is in jail now, for what I'm not even sure. Story 5. I was a situation that set off my early warning senses. We were staying at the house of the daughter of my in-laws' friends. She had a 3-year-old son. My daughter was 5. They played well together, but I got some weird vibes that told me that my daughter shouldn't be crashing in the living room in a sleeping bag. I had her sleep with my wife in the guest bed while I slept on the couch. I kept a close watch on the kids the rest of the evening. The next day, as we were leaving, the 3-year-old basically tackled my daughter. He was big. She was very small, and tried to mount and hump her on the floor. I extracted her and told him that wasn't appropriate. My daughter laughed it off as I'm trying to wrestle with her. Once in the car, I told my wife under no circumstances would our daughter ever be allowed back in that house. Ever, she agreed. We later learned that the then boyfriend of the woman with the son used to let the boy watch hardcore with him. Mom found out when CPS got involved. Story 6. He was a little kleptomaniac. He came over exactly 3 times to hang out. Each time something would go missing. No more visits. Found out recently he was recently charged with embezzlement at the company he used to work for. Story 7. He is destructive and has some unmedicated issues that affect his interaction with other kids. The kid doesn't play, he just upturns bins, throws things around, and breaks stuff. My son is growing out of this kid. The kid is very sheltered and doesn't have the behavioral therapy that the doctors recommend, so he is just too much for my oldest and now my second to deal with. So that means the request for him to come over are drying up. They really have nothing in common anymore. I had to hide our Xbox anytime. He came over after he broke multiple games and couldn't understand why the shattered CD wouldn't work and why we were mad. Story 8. I hated not letting the child sleep over, but that would have meant that my child would have wanted to sleep over at his house. His mother was living with a very abusive man who raised every single hair on my neck. This man taped off areas where my son's friend could walk and sit, rationed food, etc. I was not about to let my son be in that environment. The friends started acting out from abuse. I had already talked to the school counselor about my suspicions, and CPS was involved. It was hard to explain to a child of 8 why this friend couldn't come over. Story 9. I no longer allowed my son's best friend to come to our place or for him to go over to his after the best friend's mom reported us to the police as harboring a runaway. This was after the best friend had been tossed out his mom's house and told to spend the night sleeping outside, and she had refused our phone calls to find out what was going on. So yes, I wasn't going to let a 16-year-old spend the night in 30-degree weather with nowhere to go. Sue me. The cops showed up, said Shed reported us as harboring a runaway. We explained what was happening and got treated like dirt and told that for now on we had to have full permission from the mom. Fine. We urged my son's friend to go to the police, report to them what was happening, and left it at that. The mom tried to apologize 3 days later as being off her meds and say it was okay for my son to go to their house and vice versa. And I politely refused and hung up while she was screaming at me. ID always been kind of uncomfortable with a woman, and that just sealed it. They were still friends at school, but there were no more hanging out at either one's house, and I explained why, and they both agreed to the rules. The son is in the military now and doing quite well and no longer has contact with his mother. Gee, I wonder why. Story 10. I know the band kid. He would break, hide from you, hit the dogs, and he'd be rude and physically abusive to my grandmother. He'd pinch her for literally no reason, and probably little kid punched her a few times. He would scream for no reason, and no matter what you did for punishment, he'd ignore it. My mom physically threw him and all his toys out of our house one day after he hit a couple dogs and pinched my grandmother in quick succession. And he just stood outside and fake cried telling us to let him back, and we live in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors or traffic. He wasn't in any danger, and if he actually thought about it, he could have found his way back in. I think like an hour of peace went by, and she finally let him back in. Stories from school include walking out of class and into another, and then beating a kid up, pulling a girl down by her ponytail and wailing on her, attempting to stab a kid with scissors, and being such a handful the teacher tried to get him moved to a special needs school. He was 5 when all of that was going on. He's 6 now and medicated with therapy and doing insanely better. His mom is moving cross-country with him to be with her family so they can help look after him. He was banned from a lot of school events and didn't have many friends, but that's turning around now. Story 11 came over to our house and ripped my daughter's brand new JoJo poster that she was so proud of to shreds. Mother did nothing. To make it worse, my daughter tried to tape it back together. My heart was breaking. Story 12, early 90s. The kids on the street decided to have a camp out in someone's front yard. Little fire, ghost stories, s'mores, tents, the whole bit. Middle of the night, one of the kids starts screaming that someone is on him. Turns out another kid that just moved in had stripped down naked and smeared all over himself and attempted to do something to a sleeping kid. Parents all came out after hearing the screaming. Kid took a dump in the street and threw some at the parents of yet another kid. Again, it was the early 90s in the Midwest, so this display didn't go well. The parents went crazy. I never saw the king again, and his family moved away. The violence. THS kid just was violent to the bone. A kid tries to do anything with this kid, and a moment later they're either in a headlock or crying on the floor with bruises under their shirt. I found out a few months ago he got put into juvie. Don't think he's far from a prison sentence after he steps out. Story 13. My daughter is not allowed to stay at his house, and it can only come 2 hours during the day, but never overnight. We allowed her to stay the night there one time last year, and the stories that came back from single night were completely unacceptable. Here are a few. The dad has a room that no one is allowed to go in, not even the mom. When he is going into it or coming out of it, he knocks on the door, and everyone has to look in the other direction. The windows of that room are even blocked out with black trash bags. It said she has seen the inside of the room before, and there's just a couch, a TV, and a Spox one. I don't care. My daughter is never going to go there. The dad also apparently has lots of friends that visited all through the night. Most friends never actually came in the house. None of them knocked on the front door. The dad would either get a message or just know they were there and hang out with them for a little while by their back door. In the morning, before I picked my daughter up and they were outside playing with the dogs, my daughter is well-mannered, and when his dad asked her if she had put her breakfast plate away, she answered yes, sir. Well, apparently what he heard was yes, Sergeant, and it royally pissed him off. He started screaming at A that her friends are disrespectful and that my daughter wasn't allowed back in his house. He then referred himself in third person as Sergeant for the rest of the day, and I am told it was until way after my daughter was gone. I told my daughter at school that it had all been straightened out, and her dad felt bad about the misunderstanding and wants her to come stay the night again, and will take them four-wheeler riding in the woods as an apology. One, they don't have four-wheelers, so how is this even possible too? No way is my daughter going out in the woods with this guy. If you're wondering, no, he did not let my daughter back in the house. I had to pack up her things for her, which her dad watched her do to make sure she wasn't taking anything of theirs. When I got there, they were sitting outside. I had no idea why, nor did I think anything of it till I got the previously mentioned story. Also, what was packed up for my daughter, as her stuff was not all of her stuff, and we had to make a run to the store later for a toothbrush and her shampoo. She also didn't get any of her dirty clothes back, and they insisted at school that she couldn't find anything else of my daughter's at their house. I would not fit in my daughter's clothes, nor would her mother, so my daughter's new size 0 jeans, small shirt, small exercise bra, and panties somehow just vanished. The mom also did not speak the whole night. She just watched TV and would get up to get something for her husband or make him dinner, but she didn't speak to A or my daughter, and she also did not make them dinner. They had some popcorn and made their own breakfast in the morning. These girls were 16 at the time. I wish my daughter would have called me to say things were a bit odd. I would have come to get her sooner. Since this incident, we now have a code message because she said she didn't know what to say even if she did call me. So now if something is amiss and she is uncomfortable, she is to call or message me asking when her next orthodontist appointment is. It lets me think of the reason she has to be picked up, and she does not have to feel awkward or in any way disrespectful. I have also told her it is perfectly acceptable to just say she wants to go home, but I also understand where that can escalate an already bad situation. She can't stay the night at our house, because when he stayed at our house, her dad would call her randomly. Even at 4 a.m., she missed the call once around 12:30 a.m. and immediately called him back. He was already in his car driving to our house to get her because she didn't answer, and I had to listen to a teenager talk her own dad out of screaming rage. It was disgusting, and I'm not going to have that around my daughter. I have not stated as much to my daughter, but I am perfectly happy that her and do not hang out anymore. Edit, thank you for the platinum. I didn't come up with a secret code idea myself, but it did emerge from having watched Meet the Fockers when they would say muskrat, and then my daughter and I coming up with something that would not sound obvious to anyone, but would be a clear sign to me. I have been told that Child Services does have an open and ongoing file about their household, at least as of March of this year. I wish I had known before this all happened, but I'm just glad I know now and that my daughter was open enough with me to tell me, and I pray that there isn't more that happened that she didn't. Story 14, the father of one of my daughter's classmates, she was only in 2nd grade, kept repeatedly telling my daughter to come spend the night over there. She told me about it. So I made sure to catch him one day, and he said in a very strange way, "Oh, she's welcome to spend the night anytime," and he wouldn't look at me. Plus the way he looked at her just creeped me out. Mind you, he's a single father, so there's no other adult in the house to monitor him. Story 15, my son started public school after going to Montessori school in 4th grade. I met another mom whose son started from private school the same year. My son was weird about befriending her son, and I wasn't sure why. Shortly into the friendship, the single mom started asking if her kid could sleep over every Friday. I was fine with that. Then it became school nights. Not so fond of that. Her son started showing up at 6:30 a.m. before school when we were all still sleeping. My son made other friends and just tolerated friendship with her kid. We explained that his home life wasn't great, and he didn't have anyone most of the time. Halfway through the following school year, the kid brought a knife to school and pulled it on my son. The school did nothing Baltimore, so I contacted her to let her know what happened. Her response was that he was such a goof. My son was rightfully avoiding him at this point, and the mom had the audacity to contact me and ask if we could watch her son for half a school week, because she really wanted to go on spring break out of state with friends. She is in her late 30s getting a PhD in psychology. I had to tell her she and her kid were never going to be invited again. Story 16, my friend and her sister could sleep at our house, but my sister and I couldn't sleep at theirs. In college, I figured it out. Their house was a fire trap. Pathways between stuff like a hoarder's house. The bathtub was full of dirty water constantly. You had to move stuff just to use the toilet. The stairs to the basement, where we would have slept covered in clothes, and only one way out of the basement. The windows were too small to crawl out of if you were larger than an average 2-year-old. Saw the inside of the house years later, and it was like a different house. They had a piano in the living room that I'd never seen before, because it was just covered in hoarder. Story 17, kid has severe behavior issues and is super violent and destructive. The one and only time he came to our house, he threw all of my daughter's underwear around the room to embarrass her. The worst incident happened at school, though, when he tried to choke her out. They were 5 years old at the time. I feel bad for the kid and all. I know his mom is doing everything she can to help him, but I just can't allow that kind of behavior around my kids and in my home. Story 18, pretty sure her dad was abusive, and she picked up on that hostility. I didn't let my daughter go over, and she doesn't come over here because despite me feeling bad for the girl, she spent her time in school with my kid telling her to not listen to the teachers and to be disruptive. 9 years old, if that helps to understand. Story 19, my daughter's best friend, comes from home where the parents are kind of a mess, trying to explain to her why her friend can stay at our house. But she can't stay at their house without flat out saying her parents are constantly dealing with the police over domestic violence. Plus, you'd come home smelling like an ashtray and get the equivalent health benefits of smoking a few packs of cigarettes is a real challenge. Story 20, my youngest son had a friend who was very perverted, to put it lightly, around my youngest daughter. Head stop by during the day, and the son and friend would play video games in the basement, and the friend would make a dozen trips upstairs I didn't mind or really take notice beside, just being odd head step away from a game so much. Then one day I'm walking down the hallway, and he's in her bedroom smelling the sheets. I think, yep, you're done. Edit a few details for the comments. The boy would have been around 13 to 14 and daughter 12. He didn't come back to the house for a long time, until after they graduated HS last year. He has a girlfriend, and seems to have cooled on the perv stuff, but I still kept my eye on him. My son and the boy had different interests in high school, so they kind of parted ways. When I saw what he was doing, I told him it's time to go home. I talked to his dad shortly after. He had his pants up. I talked to my daughter after that, and a few years later just to make sure. He had said a few things to her, but she insisted he never touched her. I didn't tell her why the sheet incident when I told my wife, who can be hot-tempered. She was in the car headed down there to kick some. She didn't care whose it was either. I calmed her down, and we decided to keep an eye out for a while. Story 21, when I was in middle school, my friend was a bit goth and tough-looking. I was a good kid, and my parents knew it. My mom didn't want me hanging out with my friend because she thought she would be a bad influence on me. I told my mom that wouldn't happen and that I would be a good influence on her. My mom said, okay. My friend was not bad in any way. She just liked goth clothes. Turned out she was a good student, and she lived in a mansion and was super nice. We went to Six Flags Fright Feast, and she got me over my fear of throwing up on a roller coaster. Leslie, you were a really good friend, and your dogs were super cute. I hope you're happy in life. Story 22, my daughter was 5 at the time. There was this kid, son of coworker. Coworker was cool. My daughter got along with this kid on the playground. So we decided to do the play date thing. The kid couldn't handle sharing his toys, so he started biting. Biting is basically the kid equivalent of whipping your out at a Chuck E. Cheese, which, ironically, is much less of a big deal if you do it while you're still a kid. So we were out of there. Coworker apologized profusely and asked if we could have a do-over at our place. Figured not an issue because his toys weren't in play, nah. Then he started biting because he wanted her toys. Story 23, stopped my daughter staying at her friend's house when I found out the friend's mom was an alcoholic who was going out every night to the pub and bringing random guys home for her. Happened every time she slept there, and the mom didn't know the guys' names half the time. Story 24, completely disrespectful to our home. After multiple times telling them not to, my daughter is 6, she's 12. We live in the same complex. She'd constantly leave trash all outside, on our stairs, inside our couch, floor to where the baby can get. Makeup paint all over our carpets. She didn't care. Last and final sleepover, she invited a kid we didn't know to stay with her too. I felt bad because the girl was younger, until it was 1 a.m. and they were blasting music, yelling, and dancing. We live on the second floor. Told them to go to bed. 7:30 a.m. Same exact thing. She started coming over first thing in the morning, staying until late at night. I told her if she was hungry, she had to go home and eat and come back 2 doors down, as we didn't have enough food to feed everyone. My husband has been out of work, and we're really struggling. She wouldn't, whatever snacks we had for our 3 kids were gone a day. Can I find out? She wasn't allowed at home while her mom was at work because her 24 years old was at home. And she's getting so, she didn't need to be home alone with him. So much wrong with that statement, but true. Just last week, the mom sent her to another state for a bit. My daughter misses her. But it's been nice not having my place full of kids. She'd bring friends all the time, all day, every single day, and eating all the food we don't have. Story 25, my mom had a solid rule that I use now and will always use. If your friend can't sit here, look me in the eyes and have a conversation with me. I don't like them. Obviously, she could tell the difference from being shy versus being shady. Edit typed the comment in a hurry, and I'm also typing this edit in a hurry. Me saying shy was an acknowledgement to the socially anxious, something adults should be able to pick out fairly easy. This rule probably more aptly applied to us when we were, say, 10 or going into teenage years. Maybe saying look me in the face would have been a better way to put it, like another user said below. Story 26, my daughter was the one excluded, so thought ID at it as almost like a PSA. My kid has alopecia. For those that don't know, it's an autoimmune disease that causes your immune system to treat you hair follicles as a threat. Boom. Hair loss. Hers is stress-induced, and she went completely bald, eyelashes and eyebrows too, for almost 2 years. One of her friend's parents wouldn't let her go over there because she said she didn't want my daughter to spread her disease to her kids. She said this to my kid's face. For one, that's uncalled for. She had my phone number. Call me too. ISNE contagious. My daughter cried for days. Story 27. Dad is a chain smoker and smokes in the house. We'll have my daughter's friend stay over, but we'll find an excuse to have her take a shower early on, go to the park, swimming, etc. Our daughter can't stay there overnight, and even if she is there for a few hours, she showers and changes clothes as soon as she gets home. Story 28. My parents always refused to let me go over to that friend's house. She could come to our house, but I couldn't go over there. I always threw a fit about it in the moment. We grew apart over the years. As an adult, I had to interact with her family through my job in law enforcement. My parents never said why I couldn't go over there. They didn't want my kid mouth to tell everyone at school that Jane's parents were cocaine users dealers, and that their live-in uncle was a registered offender. I learned the truth as an adult and respect my parents for being gentle and giving white lies regarding the situation. I'm sure my kid's self would have bluntly mentioned it to Jane, and it would have hurt her. I'm sure she had it hard enough in that environment anyways. Story 29. Not bad. And he could stay over. My brother was in the closet, but my parents knew, and he wanted his friend to spend the night. My parents said yes, but they had to sleep in the living room. He then got pissed off, and it didn't happen. Story 30. As a parent, I never had to make this decision. My child and I had coded responses with each other. I knew from my own experience that these situations can be very tough, and your school friends sometimes try to pressure to do things you don't want to do, especially if they have their own agenda. Basically, if my child said, "May I go do this?" I knew she really wanted to and felt comfortable, so my answer was yes, unless we had family stuff to do. If she said, "Can I?" knew she felt uncomfortable or pressure in asking, so I would have her back and say no. I always trusted my child first and gave her the power to communicate, learn to trust her own gut, and be confident. We made up codes between the two of us for her entire growing up. It worked so well during her teenage years. If she was uncomfortable at a party or situation, she would text me a certain phrase, and I knew she wanted me to call her with a reason to leave. We also never had curfews. Each event was different. We would talk about it and decide together what time she would be home. Now, as a grown-up, she has thanked me a lot and said this was one of the best things I did for her growing up. She always felt like we were in it together. We were, and she's turning out to be an amazing person. This was a very rewarding part of being a parent. Story 31. One of our friends has a granddaughter who was treated horribly by her parents. They ignored her and just locked her in her room. When she was young, it wasn't that bad. When she came over, she would act out from time to time, but she was just so happy to be somewhere else, and you could tell. It made us feel wonderful that we could provide that, and we did so often. We tried to basically make our house a second home for her. However, as she got older, she started acting out more and more. It reached the point when she was 7 that she was stealing money from our child's piggy bank. She got into my wife's purse and stole money. We then caught her stealing toys to take home with her. She would run around saying, "You Jesus," and all sorts of different ways to say. Would take them to the park, and she would get in a literal fist-throwing fights with other kids. These sort of things started happening every time she was over. It went from "we feel so great that we can give her a break from her troubled home life" to "sorry, but she can't come over anymore," and we felt awful. But she had turned into a literal terror, and nothing we tried would get her out of it. The turning point was when she smacked our youngest across the head with a wooden toy, and he needed to get stitches. We tried to get CPS involved, but they basically said as long as she's going to school, getting fed, and not being physically or abused, there is nothing we can do. Last I heard, she's in prison for assault and drug charges. Story 32. A neighborhood 7- and 9-year-old asked my 5-year-old daughter to climb out a screenless window to go play and pet a cat. She escaped outside and did fine, but obviously I would have strongly preferred they ask permission first. We go for frequent walks and sometimes hear yelling and screaming coming from their house. While waiting for an ice cream truck, they were outside and said their parents fight and yell a lot, all while the parents were asking a 7- and 9-year-old to watch their 12-year-old brother while wandering the neighborhood. Yeah, no. Story 33. So when I was a kid, before contouring and highlighting and all the crazy makeup kids put on to go to high school was around, my mom said I couldn't hang out with this girl Amy because she wore black eyeliner and only sluts wear black eyeliner. I rallied, told her she can't judge a person based on eyeliner. I mean, that's insane. After 28 years of best friendship, Amy started sending nudes to my husband. Mom was right. I should have listened to her back in 1990. Story 34. I'd like to know why one of my daughter's friends' parents won't let her spend the night. My daughter has slumber parties, beach trips, all sorts of fun with friends gatherings. I never got to experience that as a child. So if my girl asks for a sleepover or whatnot, the default answer is yes. However, if this one friend comes over, she has to be picked up no later than 11 p.m. I don't allow drugs in the house or any drinking during these events, underage or otherwise. The girls start college next year. Isn't she old enough to go to a sleepover and watch Netflix, play video games, Daughter has asked her what the problem is, but she says parents have never let her stay over at anyone's house overnight. After meeting him only once, I didn't get good vibes from my daughter's friend's dad. If he was in that house, there's absolutely no way my daughter was going to be allowed to be. Story 35. I had a friend from school who was a year younger. So I was like 10, he was 9, and I came over to his house and played some hockey outside. Then we got bored and we started tackling each other and rolling around on the grass. After that, we went inside and watched Hotel for Dogs. Well, the next day, my friend comes over and says, "You can't come over anymore." I say, "Why not?" Then he said, "My mom thinks you're gay." Then basically the friendship died that day. I'm 10, and I'm not gay like WDF. His mom was a police officer too. She should have known we were playing. Story 36. I was a foster mom, a girl that had head lice that was resistant to all attempts to eradicate them. She had waist length, thick black hair. It was a nightmare. I even ended up with lice eventually, and I too had long, thick, dark hair. I wouldn't let her go to sleepovers with our family kids, and it was so hard to justify that we were not singling her out for being foster. I just was trying to be responsible and made sure the parents all knew and asked them to make excuses that would not include lice. I didn't want that horror from her past life to follow her around. Story 37. I'm the kid in this story. When I was growing up, there was a girl that lived across the street, about a year younger than me and a guy, which plays a role in a bit. Her parents were addicted to, I believe, meth. I one day, as a kid, saw her dad on the roof of his house grilling hamburgers while doing push-ups. Yeah. Anyways, after that, my mom would not let me stay at this girl's house, although she would still stay the night at mine. However, as we got older, my mom stopped letting her stay at our house also, because she was afraid we might start having, and she was especially afraid the girl might use pregnancy with me as a way to get out of her home situation. That's the reason my mom gave to me anyways when I was an adult, obviously. Sadly, the girl's life never really improved. When we got to high school, she started dating this older guy who apparently doesn't know how to yield on a left turn, and she died in the resulting crash years later, now that I'm older and can look back on it. The whole situation makes me really sad. She never even made it to 16. Story 38. A relatively new male friend of my 13-year-old came over for the first time. And when I say come over, I mean climbed over a 6-foot cinder block privacy fence to surprise 13-year-old with an engagement ring plastic and a plant stolen from neighbor. She was then invited on his family's vacation. She did not go. Story 39. Not her parent, but my sister is 9 years younger than me. Wouldn't accept her ex-boyfriend, not being toxic and the whole defensive act some big brothers do. I just didn't like the guy. He was super emo, and I could just see some light in my sister going out. He was really possessive of her, and whispering like worm tongue in her ear all the time. Weird stuff now. Not like whispering secret little jokes, but whispering conversations. I assumed they were mocking me or my family. I ended up making a demand that he not be in the house if I was home, not something I've ever dreamed of doing before or since. Turned out he was whispering super dark about suicide, self-harm, as well as subtly belittling and completely emotionally blackmailing her. She broke down and told my mom all about it. Thankfully, they then broke up, but he hung around trying to contact her for ages. He'd be telling her that if she didn't go back to him that had hurt himself, etc., etc. Took a while, but it fizzled out. She was back to herself in no time. Thanks to Bejasis, fast forward 10 years, I'm on an AE shift. I assessed some poor girl who has addiction and mental health problems. She had had a few suicide attempts in the last year, lo and behold. Who's her boyfriend? The same scrawny little. He refused to acknowledge my existence. When I assessed her, he just sat there looking at her and grinned, not smiling, but grinning the whole time. Psychopath and a son, not a parent yet. But my mom has always been sharp, and to know who I was friends with as a kid, I might not have believed my mom at the time to whom my bad friends or rough crowd was at the time. But looking back at it, 9 times out of 10, my mom was usually right about them. Whether it was drugs, liars, or just outright not being a good friend to her son, my mom could always see through the bullshit in people.